Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today's project is going to be a beautiful Plycraft swivel chair with an ottoman. It is in pretty decent shape, but it is in desperate need of some help. It has a little bit of damage to the base where there is some faux veneer that is peeling up. It definitely has seen its wear. It needs a good cleaning, and we are going to try to go ahead and bring this thing back to life. It's a little refreshing to be working on a project that isn't a dresser or a credenza of any type. I was really interested in this piece when I saw it, and I just had to get my hands on it because I really wanted to see what this thing would look like all cleaned up. So I start by removing the arms, which are made of some, I guess they're molded pieces of plywood with veneer over them. It's a really cool style. I debated whether I wanted to keep this chair or not, and later on in the video you will find out whether I did that or not. So I'm removing everything, and I am stripping this thing down to every last piece that I can get it to, so that way I can refinish and bring back everything. Having never worked on something that wasn't just all wood was a new learning curve for me, but it was the same concept. There was some wood, obviously a little bit of upholstery that I had to clean up, but I had to really pay attention to how I took everything apart because I wanted to make sure that I put everything back together the same way, so that way it'll function as it did before I took it apart. So I scored this chair for a really cool deal of $50. It actually sat in somebody's shed in their backyard for years, and they didn't know what to do with it, so they listed it for sale for very cheap, and I immediately knew that I had to have it. And they were pretty excited that I purchased it because they knew that I was going to restore it, and I offered to send them pictures and videos of the finished product so that way they can at least see what the chair looked like once it was all taken care of. From having sat outside, this thing got pretty rusty. All the metal swivel parts were pretty binded up and they weren't really as smooth as they should be. So I'm going to remove all of that, and I'm going to try to use a rust remover later on in the video to try to clean all of those up. Now that everything is disassembled, it is time to get to work. I broke it down as far as I can take it, and I'm pretty excited to get started on this. I start by removing this faux veneer, which is made of some sort of metal, and I was pretty excited to be removing these because I had a plan to replace them with actual real walnut veneer, and I was super excited to see how that would come out. But I did encounter a lot of this dry glue that I had to try to figure out how I was going to remove all of that. Another thing I was worried about were the feet that I just took off. Some of the plastic bits on the bottom were missing and broken off, and I wasn't exactly sure where to purchase a new set of those, so I did reach out to a buddy of mine on Instagram who does furniture restorations as well, and he has some experience with these chairs and gave me a link to some feet that actually are the right size, and I did go ahead and order some new feet for the chair and the ottoman. For these curvature pieces, I'm using my Surf Prep sander with the sponge fitting, so that way I can get around those rounded edges without squaring them off with my Festool. And if you don't already have a Surf Prep sander and you do a lot of woodworking or furniture restorations like I do, I would highly suggest get one because it really does help out getting into all those detailed areas and all those rounded areas as well. I do have a coupon code in the description of this video. It is a 10% discount code, and who doesn't love a discount? It helps me out, and it will also help you out. To address this dried up glue or contact cement, I'm taking a wire brush and a flathead screwdriver to scrape out all the bigger chunks and get it kind of down to just the minimal amount, because I am going to use some acetone and that wire brush to clean it the rest out, because I want a really nice clean surface so that way the veneer has something good to stick to. I was a little worried about getting all of this glue off because I thought it was going to be a lot more work than it was, but once you apply the acetone and use that wire wheel or wire brush, it is going to make quick work of it, and I was pretty stoked about that. Once I had all of the glue taken care of, I moved on to the black portion of the base. I'm sanding it down and scuffing it up because I plan on painting it later on in the video, but this is the rust remover that I was talking about. It comes out like a gel. It has a kind of a strong smell to it, so you might want to wear a mask. You spray it on, you let it sit for a couple of minutes, and then I'm just using the same wire brush to scrub it all down. And you really want to make sure that you wear some gloves. I should have probably used a little bit thicker gloves, but these ones thankfully held up. And then I'm just rinsing everything off with some water. And would you look at that, like most of that rust is actually gone. If any, all of it is gone. Moving on to the main swivel chair portion, I was a little intimidated about actually getting it completely clean. I wasn't sure how clean it was going to get because the metal is kind of sandwiched together and I can only go so far. So I decided to just keep scrubbing and keep cleaning, and eventually I kind of rabbit holed down to removing all of the springs and everything that held this thing together, but I wasn't able to get the two pieces separated as they are riveted and permanently joined together, so I'm gonna do the best that I can. While taking this thing apart, I did actually get familiar with the mechanism, and that part that you just seen me take off was a spring and like an adjuster. It allows you to adjust the amount of force that it has when you're trying to rock or recline this thing, and I thought that was pretty cool that they kind of threw something like that in there. Just you learn as you go. This rust remover actually works really well. I originally purchased it for a jointer, which is a woodworking tool that had a cast iron top that was really rusty. This really worked well, and I immediately thought of this stuff, and I had it in my cabinet for a pretty long time, and I was able to make good use of it to work on this project. Now that everything's clean, I'm reassembling all of the springs, and it was pretty tough, and I was kind of afraid that I wasn't going to get it put back together because these springs are really tough. But after fighting with them for a little bit, I did manage to get them all reinstalled in the places that they belong to. So now I can move on to the bases of the swivel chair. Now it's time to get to painting the base. I'm using a satin black paint. It's just a rattle can paint, nothing specific. I'm masking off the areas where I'm going to be applying veneer because I don't want paint to be in between the metal and the veneer. By any chance that something goes wrong and the veneer starts to come off later on in the future, I'm just trying to avoid that. One of the cool things about working on furniture is that every piece is different, and I learn a lot from each project as I move along and my skills progress. But I am not by any means a professional at this, so if there's ever steps or things that I'm doing that can be improved, I would really appreciate if anybody with any experience in anything that I'm working on has any tips for me. I would love some constructive criticism. I'm just trying to learn and create content so that I can help others that are trying to learn really get into this stuff, because it is fun and I do love saving furniture. Two things that I love about applying stain is that I get a good look at how this wood is going to turn out, and also all of the sanding is done. Don't get me wrong, sanding can be therapeutic to a certain point, but after so long it just gets to be a little daunting. But I'm really happy with the color that this wood is coming out to be, and I can't wait to apply a top coat so that way I can put this thing back together. I was pretty surprised to see that almost every piece of this project, wood-wise, was actually staining the same color across the board. Usually stuff like this piece right here wouldn't actually take the same color as the veneer, but for some reason I got lucky and everything is looking really good. So once that is done, I'm using the old faux veneer metal pieces to trace out some new walnut veneer that I had laying around from a previous project. And I was pretty excited about this because I felt very a sense of like accomplishment in a way that I'm actually adding more real wood to this chair than just that fake metal stuff. It's just something that I thought was really cool. One thing that I didn't realize was how hard it was going to be cutting all of this stuff out with scissors. I think next time I'm going to try to use like some sort of razor knife, because it did get a little tiring after a while trying to cut through that fairly thick veneer with some scissors. So I'm applying the same stain on all of the walnut veneer. I think I'm using a color, it's called Carrington. It's sort of a walnut color, but it has a red hue to it, and I thought that that would complement the rest of the wood that was on the piece originally. Although I tried my best to cut these as precise as possible, they didn't fit exactly perfect, so I had to use a 220 grit sandpaper to kind of sand them down to have a perfect fit. And I did so very carefully not to damage any of the stain that I put on top of it already. I'm using a peel and stick veneer, and I find that that is the easiest DIY friendly veneer to use. You don't have to mess around with any kind of spray adhesives and wait times. You just peel it just like it says, lay it down, and it is good to go. Just be very careful when you do lay it down. Make sure that it is going in the place that it's going to stay, because it's very hard to pull it up and then stick it back down. So to finish this veneer off, I decided to use a wax, because if I tried to clear coat these, the pressure from my HVLP spray gun would just blow these things all over the place, and I didn't want to deal with that. Plus it gives it a really nice natural feel. And these, I don't really know what to call these cylinders, but they basically give the chair its height. They were wrapped in that same faux veneer, so I decided to wrap those in veneer as well, just to stick with the real wood and color consistency throughout, and it actually worked out really well. So don't come for me on this one, but I know that I left a little overlap on that veneer, but I was too nervous about trying to cut a perfect line for it to meet up that I just opted to leave it that way. And I don't see too much of an issue with it, besides maybe a visual line, but it's so low to the ground that I don't think anybody would really notice. I also didn't really think about it, but I tried to fit this onto the base just to test fit it, and it was too big because it had the original faux veneer left on it, so I had to notch out the top and the bottom just so that it would sit in the base very well. Just one of those things that was an oversight, but luckily I was able to just trim it back and it was a perfect fit. Finally, we get to move on to the top coat. I'm using my favorite water-based polyurethane in a satin finish. I find that most people prefer the satin finish because it gives a little bit of shine, opposed to a matte finish, which looks like it doesn't have a top coat, or a high gloss or a gloss. A top coat tends to show a lot of the scratches and wear a lot easier, so satin for the win. Moving on from the parts of the project that are very familiar to me, I'm moving into some unfamiliar territory, which is upholstery. Luckily for me, the fabric on this chair had no real damage to it aside from some stains and maybe some dirt. So I'm just using a carpet cleaner or spot cleaner with some carpet solution and hot water to bring all of that dirt out of it and get it nice and clean. I wasn't too sure how well this was going to work because I've never really had to clean upholstery before, but pretty soon here you're going to see me empty out the bucket, and how dirty that water was, I was so surprised because it didn't look like it was actually that dirty. Yeah, total surprise. Probably the hardest part about cleaning this fabric was this stain. I'm not sure exactly what it was. It was a red stain and it seemed to be very, very tough to get out. But after doing it like 3 or 4 different times, I was finally managed to almost get it out. I'd say about maybe 90%. And this is that dirty water I was telling you about. I'm not sure where that chunks of stuff came from, but it was pretty disgusting. Now onto my favorite part, assembly. This means that all of my hard work is starting to pay off and I get to put it all back together and finally see what it's going to look like as a fully reassembled piece. It was a little tricky getting these longer rods put back in because you can't see where they're threaded. So I decided to actually put the rods on first, put everything back together, and then put the bolts back on, which the bolts I think weren't actually supposed to come off because they were very, very hard to remove. But that was the easiest and best way that I can think to get this thing back together. I'm removing those old feet because, like I said, I was replacing them, and the one on the left is hard plastic. The one on the right, which is the new one, has a really thick fabric pad built right into it, which I think is going to actually be better than the plastic, so that way you don't risk scratching your floors. One step of this project that I forgot to film was me greasing the lower swivel portion of the chair and ottoman. After using that rust remover, it did seem to still have a little bit of force when trying to spin it, and grease made quick work of that. I moved on to using a lint roller to remove all of this dog hair underneath the ottoman. I'm not exactly sure why there's so much hair underneath the ottoman and not the chair itself. That I will never know, but this lint roller made quick work of that, and now I can put on the lower swivel. Again, this has to be one of the hardest parts of this project out of everything that I had to do to get this thing to look the way it does. Putting these long rods back in without actually being able to see where those holes were in this shot, it makes it look very, very easy, like if I just magically got it on the first take, but it took a long while, and look at that, nice and new. In one of my previous videos where I restored a fully wooden chair, I got a lot of crap about using the same rusty screws to put it back together, which held the seat pan down. It was just 2 screws. It was an oversight on my part, and I totally didn't even think about it to clean the rust off those screws. But for this one, I went a step further and I got brand new screws for the entire chair, so that way I could kind of make up for the mistake that I made in the past. So here we are, everyone. The last and final step of this project is to put the arms back on. I'm super excited. It has been quite a while, me working on this chair to get it to the point to where it's at, and I cannot wait to see what everyone thinks of my first Plycraft chair. I've never worked on one of these before, but I have to say I would definitely take on another one of these in the future. So let's go ahead and all take a step back and check out this fully finished Plycraft chair. I know I say this at the end of every video, but I really love the way this project came out. Something about taking something that was discarded and old and dingy and just bringing it back to life just gets me excited. So I did say earlier in the video that either I was going to keep this chair or get rid of it, and I decided to let it go to somebody else's home because it wasn't the right fit for mine as far as the color goes. So really quick, I spent $50 on the chair. I only spent maybe $20 to $30 in material, and I sold it for $750. It went to a great home, and I'm super excited to see you guys in my next video.